Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of Popcorn and Compliance. As you know from prior episodes, Megan Dougherty, co-founder of One Stone Creative, and I are huge MCU fans. So we've decided to do the MCU movie oeuvre. That's right. We're going to do all of the MCU movies in this special podcast series. Over this series, we will take a look at the storylines, some of the cookies and other cool things. We'll describe the great action scenes from each episode, and then we'll take a look at issues raised by each episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. We will take things from the societal angle, from the social justice angle, from the MCU angle, and perhaps even from the compliance angle. But if you're an MCU fan or you're a compliance fan, I know you will enjoy. In this episode, we take up Megan's personal favorite in the MCU oeuvre, the original Thor. This podcast is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again with Megan Dougherty with another episode of Popcorn and Compliance, the MCU series. In this special series, we're going to review the entire MCU. Why? Well, because it's there, and we're both MCU uber geeks. We have other uber geeks listening, so if you're interested in being a guest, please let us know. Join in on the fun. We'll review the films as they appear in chronological order in the MCU timeline, not by release date. So today we continue with Thor. So Megan, welcome to this extended series. And as everyone knows, I'm Tom Fox, the
Thank you.
Founder of the Compliance Podcast Network and voice of compliance. And you are?
And I'm Megan Dougherty, co-founder of One Stone Creative, and I am very excited to talk about Thor. Oh, I am Megan Dougherty, the co-founder of One Stone Creative.
Are you still excited?
Yeah, I am very excited to be here today talking about Thor.
Well, great. So this is, I think, your favorite show. So I was going to let you maybe start off by telling us, why does this movie appeal to you really on so many different levels? I've heard you talk about it on the action level, the personal level, and psychological level, kind of within the context of the MCU and where you see Thor developing. But I really wanted to make this podcast more your podcast. So wherever you want to start, we'll go from there.
Well, fantastic. I'm super excited to talk about this because I think Thor Ragnarok was, if not my introduction to the MCU, it was maybe the second movie I watched, if not the very first one. And Thor Ragnarok was one of the funniest, most... Pardon? And so it was such a great, like, it was so funny, so entertaining, so enjoyable to watch that movie that was one of the things that really made me go, okay, I've got to, get in and see all the rest of these. And the first time I went back and I watched the original Thor movie, I wasn't super impressed by it. I think this is not one of the most popular movies in the franchise, and possibly that's deserved or possibly not. But Thor as a character is probably my favorite of the Avengers, of the people in the MCU. You mentioned we've talked about this a little bit before. He is referred to in some circles as Thor, defender of lesbians. And if not, globally true in all instances, it tracks pretty frequently for that to be the case, because he's kind of a lesbian, as much as a big, beefy superhero with superpowers, can be. And part of that, I think, is just what a good kind of deep down bumbling, fumbling, sweet guy he is, even at the beginning of this, his first introductory film, where he's kind of a vainglorious, self-absorbed jerk. He's still a considerate person, especially of the women in his life, which is really great to see in a character. And he seems like that safe guy, even when he's being like the worst version of himself. You'd still feel safe going out for dinner and having a beer with him. So I think that's, on the character level, one of the reasons I like him the best.
So let me take things in a little bit different direction, because in going back and rewatching this, I was struck by almost how different this movie is or was than other entries in the MCU. And I don't mean different like we talked about in terms of The Incredible Hulk, which was made by Sony. I meant the director, who was Kenneth Branagh. And Kenneth Branagh is as well-known a thespian as there is probably in the English-speaking world. Came out of Shakespeare in the English tradition of the Royal Shakespeare Company. 40 years, I think, in film. And it turns out a lot of the actors who played roles in this did so at a specific request of Branagh. So his prints are all over this. But I first thought in rewatching it, and most particularly in New Mexico, I felt like I was watching something very different than I typically saw from the MCU. And I have to chalk that up as Branagh. I haven't been able to find anything that would say why he was so attracted to this particular film or this particular project. Although, as you said, what's not to love? And what's not to love for the Norse myth of Thor? And if you got the coolest hammer of all time, I mean, really, what more do you need? But there was so much that I thought we had lots of action, obviously, particularly in the first half of the movie, when Thor and Loki battle back and forth, and when Thor is banished to Earth by his father, played by Anthony Hopkins. And the
always a treat.
There's one tool in all of Marvel comics, perhaps none is better known than Thor's hammer. So very iconic. Natalie Portman, I thought, was just fabulous in her role. But it also harks back to another American tradition, which is sort of the 50 sci-fi movies. And I'm a big fan of those. They generally were topics around the something happened because of an atomic bomb, whether it was giant ants or giant lizards or a squid sometimes. There was always something from the A-bomb, obviously in black and white. But many of them happened in the desert. So for me, it kind of harked back to that. So Natalie Portman in her role, Idris Elba, I know I butchered his last name, but he's a fabulous English actor. And I loved his role in this. And he was one of the actors who specifically came on board because Branagh asked him to. He really had no interest or even knowledge about the MCU at that point. Hemsworth, the actor who played Thor, turned out to be just an inspired choice. And he, turns out he was originally had auditioned for the Hulk role in the prior movie we talked about, did not get it. But he, and then he auditioned for this role, was turned down, but he got called back for a second reading. And he said between the first and second reading, he bulked up to the size, of course, of what we see him at now. And I mean, he is one bulked up dude, and he's, very impressive to look at from a physical specimen point of view. But I really liked your point about his inner sweetness. And I don't want to say naivete, but he almost had naivete. He's just so sweet and he's so nice. And whenever you see a very big hulking guy with a kind of a petite girl like Natalie Portman, they always tend to treat them with just the utmost kindness because they're afraid if they look at them too hard, they're going to break them in half, let alone get physical with them. So
it reminds me of my sister and her husband just have that exact dynamic, and they are so adorable.
And so that, all of that overlays, I think, a really interesting dynamic. I'm sorry we really didn't get to see, I guess we can say, too much more of Natalie in the rest of the MCU. But in this one, I thought she was just great. And I just love the New Mexico scenes as well. The mythology part was tough for me to follow the first time. So I was really glad we had a chance to do this series and to see it again. But Idris, let me see if I can pull up the role he played. Idris plays the character Heimdall, but he is the sentry from the Asgardian Bifrost Bridge, which is actually the wormhole that takes the Asgardians across the universe and down into Earth. And it's an incredibly cool role. He does it with panache and with this huge sword. So it was a small role, but a very interesting and important role. What did you think of Tom Hiddleston as Loki?
Thought he was such a good choice for the role. I mean, and Loki as a character was so interesting. And he really kind of became like the big bad, the villain for this phase of the MCU. But even at the beginning, I think he was actually written and played as a lot more nuanced than your typical villain, because he's wearing his heart pretty close to his sleeve, even when he's playing all of these long cons. That what he really just wants is to feel good about himself and be accepted by those who love him, or by those he loves and admires. So I thought he did a great job, and the relationship between he and Thor was great. I think one of my favorite moments was when they went to Jotunheim, and Thor is about to make the smart choice and back away. Okay, we're not going to actually go to war today. Then someone insults him, and Loki's damn, because he knew what was going to happen. He knew who his brother was and how this was going to play out. And I thought it was a really warm delivery of the character. He does bad things, but he does them for really understandable reasons, which is, I think, a great mark in a villain.
So Loki, obviously we're going to talk about him extensively as we move forward through the MCU. But one of the things that, and we see a lot of actual character development towards the end of his career in the MCU, he becomes much more of a trickster. And in the mythology, Loki is a trickster. In Native American mythology, I think on both sides of the border here in North America, he's often the wolf, sometimes the fox. So, of course, resonates with me. But in this one, he shows, I thought, some dark sides from time to time, and that we turn out later that may not be as dark as we thought, but he is definitely a power to be reckoned with here as well. Did you have any cookies that you really liked or struck you, Megan?
A couple, yeah, and one is just about Loki, and this is kind of maybe fun mythology fact, we'll call it. So when Odin goes to Jotunheim to rescue his idiot children and their friends, he's riding an eight-legged horse named Sleipnir. Who is actually Loki's child. Loki, at one point in the mythology, turned into a mare and had a dalliance with a very famous stallion, producing the eight-legged horse that Odin then rode for the rest of time. So I thought that was kind of fun that they popped that right in there. Another cookie I really, really enjoyed, I thought this might have been, this is kind of where I noticed Thor's sweetness. When he was trying to rally his friends up and we're going to go to Jotunheim. We're going to find out what's going on. It's going to be great. Haven't I done this? Am I not this? And he goes, and who was it that proved a mere maiden could be the fiercest warrior? And she's just like, I did. And he's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. You did. And I supported you and you're great. But it was you. It was all you. And that was so wonderful. Such a nice moment. And something I kind of, maybe it's a whole movie cookie. If you take the movie at like super, super face value, it's a little corny, it's a little hammy. But I kind of realized watching it again this time, everyone's just playing the straight man. And it's actually hilarious because they slip once in a while. When he and Jane are sitting in the cafe and his friends have just kind of come to Earth to help them fight the Destroyer. And they all come up to the window and they're waving and grinning like puppies. That's hilarious. That's who they really are. So I think the movie was intentionally played straight a lot of the time, and I think that's why maybe it got a lot more criticism, because it's really funny when you kind of take it as everyone knows exactly what they're doing and why as an actor playing a character.
We're going to have a word from our sponsor, then we'll be right back with more Popcorn and Compliance. So there were three cookies I wanted to talk about. One is, I'm not sure it really is a cookie because it's so direct and part of the ongoing series, and that's Agent Phil Colson. And he really plays a straight guy in this one. And perhaps his most straight, although maybe he's more straight in the Avengers, which we'll get to in our next episode. But I thought he played a great role, and just his deadpan face was perfect in this episode or this movie. Second was, there was early on a name card with the name Donald Blake on it. And Donald Blake is Thor's human alter ego in the comic books. So that was pretty cool. And then we got our first, I think the first hint at Hawkeye, who was there to help guard Thor's hammer when it was lost in New Mexico. So some pretty cool stuff in I guess every time we go back to movies that are now 10 years old, I'm struck by how young everybody is. And Chris Hemsworth is certainly younger, but he is so cool in this, and he plays, as you said, just I think with the right amount of panache, or the right amount of sweetness, the right amount of humor, the right amount of strength, and when need be, kind of godlike power. So I thought he did a great job in this. Anything you'd like maybe to mention in closing, Megan?
That was a nice little kind of marker and way to end the movie of, okay, no, there's more to come for this person. There's been a lot of development up to this point, but we're just getting started.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Popcorn and Compliance, the MCU series. I hope you will join Megan and I again for our next episode where we take up the Avengers. Also, I'd like to tell you about a special podcast series that recently premiered on the Compliance Podcast Network, Trial of the Century, the Enron Trial, where with business journalist Lauren Steffi, who covered the Enron trial, we take a look at the trial of Enron as opposed to the bankruptcy. I know you'll enjoy it if you like fraud, if you like trials, or you just like a good story. Check it out on the Compliance Podcast Network. So until next time, this is Tom Fox. Thanks again for listening. Popcorn and Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.